Kia ora. Welcome to the Climate Energy Finance Group Symposium, day 2. Nice to see you again, Ben.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Great, and welcome. So I call you Joey. Is that the tail?
Yeah, Joey here.
Thank you, Joey. Great for joining us. I'll just get everyone to take a seat and looking good on time. We're just 2 minutes off starting. So you will be presenting first, Joey. And Ben, I think, is going to discuss your paper. Is that correct? Oh no, sorry, Stephanie's going to discuss your paper. My apologies. Sorry, Ben.
No problems.
A surprise discussion. Yeah, Joy, would you like to bring your presentation slides up onto your computer and share them with us, please?
Okay, let me try that.
Thank you.
Let me click share screen. Then screen 1. Then you should be able to see my slides. Can you see that?
That looks excellent. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
Maximize that. What's that? This one? Oh, yeah, that looks great. All right, so tēnā koutou katoa, everybody, and it's my pleasure to welcome Daewoung Choi, known as Joey, and he's here from Louisiana State University, and he's going to present this afternoon the final session, which is the session looking at ESG. So when you're ready to start, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, and I'll let you introduce your paper. Thank you so much.
Okay. So can I start?
Yes, please.
All right. So, right. This is Daewoung Choi from Louisiana State University report. First of all, I want to thank you for this great opportunity to share my work at CEF Group Climate Finance Symposium. And actually here, today is the Thanksgiving in the States. So like I'm in the upstairs, downstairs, there is a big party. So right after this session, I should go down to celebrate. But anyway, no, I really, thank you for this great opportunity. And the title of the project is The Effect of ESG-Motivated Turnover on Firm Distress Risk. And this is joint work with Yong-Kyu Kam at University of College Dublin, and Min-Chung Kang at University of Michigan, and Ho-Jung Shin at California State University. Well, we are still revising this paper, so we'll be glad to receive your valuable comments and feedback, and we are going to incorporate them into the next draft. Okay. So first, before we get into the main argument, let me briefly talk about the background of this project. Recently, business and finance literature start to provide great attention to the corporate issues relating to ESG practices. ESG means environmental, social, and governance. The initial agreement is that a bad reputation for ESG practices lead to subsequent adverse reactions by its various stakeholders. For example, in response to a firm's negative ESG activities, customers boycott the firm's products. Institutional investors disinvest in the firm's equity stocks, and lenders terminate their lending relationship with the borrower firms. So these adverse reactions might continue and eventually threaten the firm's success or firm's survival unless the firm take any appropriate and timely corrective action to relieve stakeholders' concern and stress. Okay, so one of the observable powerful corrective action would be CEO replacement decision, dismissal decision. And prior studies show that firms tend to replace their CEOs following the firm's misconduct or negative media coverage for ESG issues. We know that CEO dismissal decision is costly. Okay, for example, prior study often look at the cost and benefit side of the CEO dismissal decision. But firms might take such action. Firm might fire their executive, their manager, when they believe benefit is greater than cost. So the effect of a CEO replacement decision on the firm's future financial outlook, particularly conditioned on increased ESG reputation risk, is quite underexplored. So in this study, we investigate that how effectively a forced CEO turnover is used as ex post damage instrument to reduce the firm's financial distress risk triggered by ESG reputational risk. For this project, we focus on US listed firms covered in Web Risk database over the period from 2007 to 2015. We exclude financial firms and utility firms because they are regulated in different way. And let me briefly discuss the Web Risk database. Since 2007, Web Risk has started tracking 28 ESG-related issues through media, NGOs, government bodies, regulators, newsletters, social media, and other online sources. And they measure a firm's ESG reputational risk using those media coverage. Okay, and Web Risk data is different from other measures of ESG in that Web Risk is based on non-subjective external media sources. So what I'm saying is, rather than using firms' self-reported ESG information, Web Risk collects the negative ESG news across various media channels over the world. So you might be familiar with the Bloomberg ESG score or KLD score, but these traditional measures are based on firms' self-reported information, so that the information could be overestimated with the manager's discretion. We use Web Risk data instead. Web Risk data provides more objective assessment of the effect of the firm's ESG-related reputational risk. So which might reduce the endogenous concern partly, in that it is difficult for manager to endogenously manipulate the negative ESG news across various media channels over the world. For our empirical analysis, we use several measures of ESG reputation risk. The first measure is ESG RRI, which is an annualized ESG reputation risk index, and it ranges from 0 to 100. Higher the value of RRI, greater ESG reputation risk. Our second measure is ESG peak RRI, which is the highest level of ESG risk index over the last 24 months. First, two measures are reported by Web Risk. They use their own methodology to construct these two variables. Alternatively, we create another measure. We simply manually count the number of ESG news articles during the fiscal year. On average, 7 ESG related news articles appear during the year. For additional analysis, we consider other measures based on severity of the risk incidents or reach, the influence of the media sources. We also consider alternative measures based on the category of ESG news. To measure a firm's financial distress risk, we use the Altman-Z score, which is based on 5 financial ratio: profitability, leverage, liquidity, solvency, and activity ratio. A higher the probability that a firm goes into bankruptcy, the lower the Altman-Z score. Okay? And in the robustness test, we consider alternative measures of firm distress risk. We use industry-adjusted Altman-Z. Simply, we compare the firm's actual Altman-Z score to the industry median. And Altman-Z distress zone is an indicator variable that equals 1 if the Altman-Z score is less than 1.81. So we use this threshold to construct this dichotomy dummy variable. And we also use O score and ZM score. They are from these studies. And we obtain first set CEO turnover data from these following studies. And we include CEOs who appear at least 2 years in our sample, and CEOs under the retirement age of 65. And this is the result from the baseline regression models. Dependent variable is Altman-Z score at year T contemporaneous year, and the key independent variable is ESG-RRI measured in the previous year. We include firm level covariates. So those control variables include firm size, leverage, profitability, and growth, volatility, investment intensity, and cash dividend, and sales growth, firm life cycle stage, firm age, and the institutional ownership. Okay. Here again, higher value of ESG-RRI indicate the greater ESG reputation risk, and lower value of Altman-Z score indicates greater likelihood of firm distress. So let's look at the models 1, 3, and 5. In models 1, 3, 5, we find the negative coefficient on ESG-RRI. So this suggests that higher ESG reputation risk leads to higher distress risk. In other words, firms fail to maintain sound ESG reputations are more likely to experience firm distress risk in the subsequent year. Next, we move on to our main analysis models 2, 4, 6. In models 2, 4, 6, we interact ESG-RRI with first set turnover variable. We find positive and significant coefficient on the interaction term. In other words, the negative relation between ESG risk and firm distress is significantly mitigated when the CEO dismissal decision, CEO turnover decision is made right after the ESG-related media coverage. And to account for the long-term effect, we use 1 year later Altman-Z score instead. Our results are the same. And during the 2008 financial crisis, many firms were subject to a greater risk of distress and default. our results are same when we include sample in the post-financial crisis. And we also exclude oil and gas industry firms where the industry peer firms suffer from another peer industry firms extremely featured ESG risk, like such as BP oil spill in 2010. And again, our results are the same. And we also replace forced CO turnover with voluntary CO turnover, but our results are confirmed only with the forced CO turnover. Okay, and the forced CO turnover following ESG risk reduce the firm's financial distress, but we have not yet discovered, we have not yet discovered through which channel it decreases. So we look at the composition of Altman-Z, as Altman-Z score is composed of various financial ratio. Here, it is worth to examine which components are mainly affected by forced CO turnover in relation to ESG reputation risk. And so we consider 5 financial ratios. The estimated coefficient of the interaction terms are significant only in model 4 across panel A to C, where the dependent variable is market value of equity over total liability. And this result shows that among various stakeholders, the firm's CEO replacement decision more effectively comfort the shareholders concerned with the firm's ESG reputation risk. But if shareholders indeed respond to the dismissal decision following ESG risk, we should expect the market to rapidly react to the forced turnover announcements in a very short horizon. So in additional tests, we see that cumulative abnormal return and the cumulative abnormal return is higher for the forced turnover firms with high ESG risk. These are the results we confirm additionally. These are the additional results. We consider other measures based on the severity of the risk incidents or which the influence of the media source. We also consider alternative measures based on the category of ESG news. And here, higher severity news include the issues about overuse and wasting of resources, social discrimination, child labor, corruption, and bribery. High reaching news include international media, including Financial Times, BBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Okay, and the environmental social governance issue cover. This is an indicator variable that equals 1 if the firms had at least 1 negative news articles pertaining to its environmental, social, and governance issues during the year. And the results show that the mitigating effect of the CEO dismissal decision seemed to be more effective when ESG risk is captured by well-known international media sources, particularly when environmental issues are covered. And the endogeneity test, now 47. So this is empirical work, so our results are subject to endogenous sources like omitted variable concern, measurement error, and selection bias, and the big concern is simultaneous issue. The omitted variable concern, we use the web risk ESG data based on various external media sources. We control for various firm level characteristic and industry and year fixed effects. And but simultaneous issue is the one source of endogeneity. It's hard to rule out. For example, firm distress and ESG risk or interaction effect of forced CO turnover could be jointly determined by some unknown factors. So to mitigate such concern, we first use lagged measure of ESG reputation risk as an ex-ante trigger event. But this is quite naive. But we try to use IV approach. Our main endogenous variables are the measure of ESG risk and the interaction term between ESG risk and forced turnover. Instrumenting the standalone term and the interaction term together are not easy. So we follow the prior study, 2015 JF paper, and we consider an indicator for climate risk, regional climate risk, as an instrument variable for the firm's ESG reputation risk. The assumption is that media coverage on ESG issues may appear more often in the region, in the area where residents' interest on ESG issues are high. But we do not expect that regional climate risks directly affect firms' future survival. In the first stage, our instruments are shown significantly associated with endogenous variables. In the second stage, we find the same result, the positive coefficient on the interaction term between instrumented ESG RRI and forced turnover. We try to discover any exogenous shock to see we can use any quasi-natural experiment, but we could not identify anything. So this is the way we rule out the endogeneity concern. I have 10 minutes. We investigate how the mitigating effect of forced turnover on firm distress varies across firms, conditioned on several external environments. We consider three mechanisms: market concentration and thin industry classification and analyst coverage. And these mechanisms bring markets great attention and the scrutiny on the firm's policies and outcomes. So we partition the sample into two groups based on the level of this mechanism, each of these mechanisms. And results show that the mitigating effect of forced turnover is stronger for firms under high market concentration and firms run within the thin industries and firms with larger analyst coverage. Forced CO dismissal decision will be more effective if it is for manager who has greater power or senior position, such as chair on the board, because they will be more noticeable and they have more responsibility. They have full responsibility for ESG reputation risk, for the failure of ESG practices. So results show that the mitigating effect of CO turnover is stronger for firms with CEOs who hold greater power and authority. And then we also check whether our findings are mechanically obtained through other possible mechanisms. Strategic CSR spending is one potential instrument a firm may consider when they face a loss of reputation. So some firm might strategically use CSR spending as for like a window dressing tool, We examine whether the incremental effect of forced CO turnover is compromised with the interaction effect between CSR spending and ESG risk measure. And results show that even though we take into account the CSR investment in the models, the interaction effect of forced CO turnover is still significant at the 1% significant level. And these are the robustness tests using alternative measure. Again, we use industry, so abnormal Altman-G score and the Altman-G distress zone and the O-score MGM score. We find that all results are consistent when we use this alternative measure. So let me conclude my my work. So here, CEO replacement is an important decision in any organization in this fast-changing corporate world. We identify the channel how a forced CEO turnover alleviates the firm's financial distress risk associated with the ESG reputation risk. And we find that equity holders' sensitive response to the CEO replacement following the negative media coverage of the firm's ESG practices are the one of the key driver behind the mitigation of the subsequent firm's financial distress risk. So here, overall, our research suggests any policy implication of forced CEO turnover to manage firm's ESG reputation risk, as well as firm's financial distress risk.